She just wanted to buy notebooks. But they followed her, watched her, accused her, right in the middle of the aisle. No apology, no hesitation, no truth, until a man walked in through the sliding glass doors. A man in black robes, calm, controlled. And when he said her name, the entire store went silent, because the man they just called, the one they wanted to press charges with, wasn't coming to help them. He was her father, and he was the judge who signed every warrant in that county. The store lights buzzed low above her, cold, steady, indifferent. It smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and cardboard, the kind of sterile scent that made even new things feel old. Amira moved quietly through the aisle, fingers trailing along the shelf of notebooks. Her hoodie sleeves were pushed up to the elbows, and the cord of her earbuds dangled beneath her chin like vines. One bud tucked in, the other left loose so she could still hear the world. She always did that. The world never stopped watching her, so she learned not to stop listening. In her hand, a soft blue spiral-bound notebook. She flipped it open, checked the pages, closed it again, slipped it into the crook of her arm. She wasn't rushing, just collecting what she needed. A pen pack, sticky notes, highlighters in soft colors, lavender, mint, gray. Her backpack sagged slightly behind her, open just enough to show the edge of a water bottle and the corner of a graphing calculator. She wasn't hiding anything, wasn't trying to. She just liked to walk the store alone, figure things out for herself. No list, no rush. A mother and daughter passed her in the aisle. The little girl pointed to a folder with glitter stars on the front. Amira smiled without thinking, just a small curl of the mouth, then kept moving. The speaker above her head crackled with a price check. Somewhere behind her, a shopping cart rattled. Normal sounds, nothing alarming. But then, that feeling, the kind that started not in your chest but behind your ribs, like a question too afraid to speak. Amira didn't turn her head, didn't give them the satisfaction, but she felt it, the weight of it. Someone was watching her, not browsing, not glancing, watching. She reached for a second notebook, yellow this time, held it, pretended to read the back. Then slowly, casually, she shifted her eyes just enough to catch the reflection in the metal shelf edge. 2 aisles down, a man in a red vest, not pretending to do anything else, just standing, arms crossed, eyes locked on her like she was the reason the world didn't feel safe. She blinked once, turned her gaze forward, not because she was scared, because she was used to it. She adjusted the strap of her backpack, pressed the 2 notebooks against her chest, and walked toward the checkout. Not too fast, not too slow, just the right speed to say, "I have nothing to hide," even if they'd already decided she did. The hum of the fluorescent lights didn't change, but the energy did. Behind the register, Greg adjusted his stance, one hand resting on the edge of the counter, the other tapping the screen like he was waiting for it to tell him what to do next. He squinted toward aisle 7, eyes narrowing, not with focus but with certainty already half-formed. Next to him Marla leaned in, voice low. "She's been over there a while." Greg didn't respond, just kept watching. "She's got a backpack," Marla added, as if that sealed it. In aisle 9, Jemal pushed a broom with more purpose than interest, pausing at the edge of school supplies. His job wasn't surveillance, but he'd seen this scene before, too many times. He didn't say anything, just swept. Greg finally straightened, nodding slightly. "Yeah, go check if she needs help." But it wasn't a question, and it wasn't help. Marla smoothed her vest, started walking, casual, but with purpose. Greg's eyes didn't leave the aisle. His posture said concern, but his expression said something else, like he was solving a problem that hadn't happened yet, one he'd already decided was real. He couldn't say what she'd done, couldn't name it. She hadn't run, hadn't grabbed, hadn't looked over her shoulder, but she was wearing a hoodie, and she had a backpack, and she was alone. That was enough for Greg to decide her presence needed context. He'd worked here for 12 years, could count the shoplifters on one hand, but when he thought about the ones he remembered, they didn't all look like Amira. Still, the feeling tugged at him. The one he wouldn't say out loud, but had learned to trust more than facts. The manager badge on his chest made him feel justified, like he didn't need proof, just a hunch, and someone to confirm it. Behind him a line was forming at the checkout. He didn't move. In the reflection of a hanging mirror, He saw Marla pause at the end of the aisle, then double back toward him. "She's headed to the front," she said, voice quieter now. "Didn't take anything I could see, but she looked, I don't know, jumpy." Greg nodded slowly. "Keep an eye on her," he said. The words weren't loud, but they didn't have to be, because in this store, keep an eye on her didn't mean safety. It meant we've already made up our minds. The plastic made a soft crinkle as she picked up the highlighters. 5 in a pack, pastel tones, the kind that didn't shout on a page. She turned them in her hand, reading the label even though she already knew what it said. Behind her the air shifted, not colder, just closer. She didn't move at first, just stood still, the pack still between her fingers. Then slowly, deliberately, she turned her head. A woman stood near the end of the aisle, not browsing, not reaching for anything, just standing, a red vest on, clipboard tucked to her side like it mattered, eyes locked on a mirror, then flicking away the second they met. Not subtle, not embarrassed, just exposed enough to pretend she hadn't been doing what they both knew she had. Amira didn't speak, didn't frown, just turned back to the shelf. Picked up a second pack, this one muted blues. The highlighters made a soft clack as she added them to her arm, next to the notebooks. Her hands stayed calm, her breath even, but the heat was climbing. Not anger, not fear, just that slow rise of knowing. They were watching her, not because she'd done anything, but because her existence asked a question they didn't know how to answer. Who is she? Why is she here? What's in her bag? What does she really want? She hadn't done anything wrong, but that wasn't the point. The point was, she didn't look like someone they trusted to be right. She adjusted her backpack on her shoulder, rolled her neck once, a slow motion meant for herself. Then she walked, not fast, not defiant, just forward, toward the checkout, toward the tension, toward whatever they thought they were going to do next. Behind her the clipboard woman turned slightly, raised a hand toward someone out of view, a gesture, a signal, and Amira, without turning back, knew it had begun, not because of anything she took, but because they'd already taken something from her the moment they decided to look before they thought. That's the thing about suspicion. It doesn't need evidence, just a story. And sometimes that story is made of plastic packaging, quiet aisles, and the wrong kind of skin in the wrong kind of hoodie. The checkout lanes glowed ahead, each one humming with idle beeps and slow-moving lines. Amira kept her head forward, her steps even. The items in her arm barely weighed anything, but her shoulders felt heavy. She could feel them shifting behind her. The workers, the watchers, moving just enough to stay close. She reached the end of aisle 5, and turned left, 4 registers open, 2 with blinking lights. She took a breath, stepped toward the shortest line, and that's when he appeared. Greg, store manager badge clipped to his chest, hands on hips, one step in front of her path, like he belonged there. "Miss," he said, voice loud enough to turn a few heads. "I'm going to need you to empty your bag." No hello, no reason, no room to say no, just authority. Amira blinked, once, slowly. "Excuse me, your backpack," he repeated, pointing at it like it had confessed something. "I need you to open it, right here." She glanced around, felt the shift in the air, the quiet behind the registers, the phone camera that was now hovering in the hands of the teen 2 lanes over. "I haven't stolen anything," she said. Greg didn't blink. "Then you shouldn't have anything to worry about." That line, the one they all used, the one that sounded reasonable, only if you forgot what it felt like. Amira's breath came tight in her chest, not from fear, from restraint. "You're accusing me." "I'm asking for cooperation," he said, lips pressed too tight to be honest. "We've had some concerns. You've been acting suspicious." She didn't laugh, she didn't raise her voice. She just set the notebooks and highlighters down gently on the counter beside her, and reached for the zipper. Slow, deliberate. Inside, a water bottle, a pencil pouch, a phone charger, a book with a worn spine. She turned the bag toward him. Let him see. Let the room see. Greg looked, then frowned, like he'd expected the guilt to rise out of the fabric. It didn't. Just silence. "You mind if I take a look myself?" he asked, already reaching. Amira pulled the bag slightly back. "I do mind." His eyes narrowed. "You got something to hide?" She stared at him, flat, unmoved. "No, But I'm not handing over my things just because you feel like it. He opened his mouth again, then closed it, because suddenly, it wasn't about the bag anymore. It was about the fact that she hadn't flinched, that she stood there, still, whole, and made him look small. The room didn't go quiet. It went sharp. Like the space itself started listening. 2 aisles over, an older couple pushing a half-full cart slowed to a stop. The man squinted, one hand on the handle, the other rising to adjust his glasses. The woman leaned in, whispering something, eyes fixed on Amira. In lane 3, a boy barely older than Amira pulled out his phone, started filming. Not dramatic, just subtle, the way people record things when they want evidence and distance at the same time. Near the door, a mother gripped her toddler's hand a little tighter. It was happening, the shift, not loud, but wide, and Amira stood in the center of it. Her face burned, not with heat, not with shame, but with the sick, slow throb of being put on display. "I didn't take anything," she said, voice steady but low. Greg crossed his arms. "We'll find out." She wanted to scream, not out of fear, but out of the weight of it all, because this wasn't about highlighters. It wasn't about policy. It was about her, the hoodie, the skin, the silence she kept while shopping, the fact that she moved like she didn't need permission to be there. That was the part they didn't like. And now, every eye in the store was waiting, not for proof, but for performance. Because the moment you're accused in public, truth doesn't matter. What matters is whether your calm makes them nervous, whether your fear makes them smug, whether your existence makes them decide who they are in comparison. "I said," Amira repeated, each word slower now, clearer, "I didn't steal anything." A cashier 2 registers down, looked over, then looked away just as fast. A man near the gum rack shook his head. Not at her, not at Greg, just at the idea of having to be near it. No one asked if she was okay. No one stepped in. They just watched. The manager didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The accusation had already done its job. She could feel it sinking in, not into her but into them. And that was the worst part. Not the humiliation, but the quiet realization that no one here was seeing her. They were seeing a headline they'd already decided was true, and she was standing in the middle of it, holding the weight of a lie she never told. The zipper hissed open like a secret, being forced into daylight. Amira held the backpack steady, hands calm, even though her chest felt like it was wrapped in wire. Inside 2 folders, one red, one teal, tucked side by side, a half-drunk bottle of water, her charger, coiled like a sleeping snake, a paperback book with creased pages, and nothing else. No tags, no wrappers, no plastic torn from shelves. She turned the bag slightly, so Greg could see, let the light catch every corner. He leaned in, eyes scanning like he expected something to crawl out, like shame might appear if he stared hard enough. Nothing did. Amira didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The bag spoke for itself. But Greg straightened, crossed his arms tighter, the kind of stance that says I'm not wrong, even when every fact around you is screaming that you are. "Then why were you looking around so much?" he asked. The question dropped like a weight onto the air. Not a question really. A statement, dressed up like concern. Amira blinked. "Excuse me." "You kept turning," he said, voice firmer now, trying to pull the room back to his side. "Looking over your shoulder. Seemed nervous." She didn't laugh. She didn't raise her voice. She just stared. "You mean I was aware of my surroundings?" she said, voice flat. He didn't answer, because there was no answer, just the echo of an accusation he couldn't back up. No proof, just posture, no facts, just the flinch of his own discomfort. A few more shoppers had stopped now. Not close, just near enough to feel like part of the moment. Someone whispered something that sounded like she didn't even do anything. But it didn't matter. Greg had decided the truth already. And now he needed to justify it. "You were acting off," he added. "Off," she repeated. "How?" He hesitated, searched for something to hold on to. "You didn't smile. You didn't say hello to anyone." Amira almost laughed then. Almost. But she didn't, because she knew the rules better than he did. Smile too much, you're suspicious. Smile too little, you're cold. Say nothing, you're a threat. Say too much, you're aggressive. The only thing that felt off was his sense of who belonged here. and she was interrupting it. Quietly, completely, and without apology. Greg reached behind the counter without breaking eye contact, lifted the black store phone from its cradle with the kind of practiced motion that didn't shake. His fingers pressed 3 buttons. Internal, security. Amira didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. The cord stretched slightly as he turned his back, voice low but clear enough to carry. Yeah, it's Greg. We've got a theft situation at Register 4. Her chest tightened. He kept talking. Young girl, Hoodie, possibly hiding something. Might need someone to hold her until the authorities arrive. Each word fell like a drop of ink on white cloth. Permanent, irreversible. She blinked once. I didn't steal anything. Greg turned back around, cradling the phone between his shoulder and ear. We're gonna need someone out here. Now. A pause. A nod. Then the click of the phone sliding back into place. He folded his arms again. Said nothing. Around them the store kept moving, but slower. Beeping at the self-checkout grew tentative. The shuffle of carts more cautious. The boy with the phone was still filming, though now his hands had stilled. Amira looked around. The world had taken a step back from her, like she was aflame, like she'd burn them if they stood too close. I didn't steal, she said again. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to, but the moment it left her mouth, it sounded too soft for the weight of what was happening. Because Greg had done what so many do when their instinct gets ahead of truth. He made it official. Now it wasn't just suspicion. It was procedure. She took a breath, trying to steady her hands without showing it. This wasn't about guilt. It never was. It was about control, about how fast one man could rewrite a moment with a sentence, and how long the person on the other end had to live with it. You said possibly, she said, voice steadying now. That means you don't know. Greg didn't respond, because the truth was too loud in the quiet that followed. And Amira, alone calm accused, stood in the space between his story and reality, and refused to disappear. She stepped toward the exit. Just one step. Greg moved in front of her. Not aggressive, not loud, just there, blocking the space with his body, like he'd always had the right to. You'll need to stay right here, he said. Amira looked up at him, calm, measured. Why? Greg didn't answer her directly, just turned to Marla, who had circled back from the other aisle, her hands clasped nervously. Go make sure security's coming, he said. Then to no one in particular, she's not leaving until this is sorted. Amira felt it again, that shift. Not fear, not even anger, just the slow descent of someone else's assumption, wrapping itself around her day. I haven't been accused of anything, she said. Greg raised an eyebrow. You were acting suspicious. That's enough for us to hold you until police arrive. There it was, that word again. Suspicious. Thin as smoke, heavy as stone. A younger employee stood near the candy rack, eyes darting between them. Barely out of high school. Name tag crooked. Should we wait for the cops before doing anything else? He asked quietly. Greg nodded. She can explain it to them. Amira turned her head toward the doors. The sliding glass glowed with sunlight. Just past it. Freedom. Just past it. A world where this hadn't happened yet. But she stayed. Not because she was guilty, but because leaving would confirm the lie he'd already told. She adjusted the strap of her backpack again. Not because it needed adjusting, but because it gave her something to do while the world decided what version of her it was going to believe. I'm not going to run, she said. Greg said nothing, because in his mind, she already had. She'd run the moment she walked into his store, and didn't ask permission to exist. That's what this was. Not about theft, about presence, about the quiet challenge of a black girl moving through space like she owned her time. The kind of thing that made men like Greg uneasy. She stood still, not because she was trapped, but because they needed her to flinch, and she refused to give them that. The glass doors at the front of the store let out a soft shriek as they parted. It wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. The murmurs, the quiet beeping, the heavy silence pressing down around Amira. 2 polished black shoes stepped onto the tile. Then the hem of a robe, long, dark, crisp folds that swayed with purpose. The man who entered didn't rush. He didn't need to. Each step landed with quiet precision, the kind of rhythm that didn't ask permission, just announced presence. Not through volume, through certainty. Heads turned, one by one. A cashier paused mid-scan. The boy with the phone lowered it just slightly. Even Greg looked up. The man's hands were empty, his posture straight. A small gold pin glinted just below his left shoulder. And then, Amira, the voice was deep, calm, not confused, not alarmed, just there. And in that moment, Amira exhaled. Not relief, not rescue, recognition. She turned. Dad. The word came soft, but it landed hard. A ripple moved through the room. Greg's jaw twitched. The younger employee blinked like he'd misheard. The man stepped forward, robes brushing softly at his sides. A presence built not from size, but from what followed behind him. Decades of law, judgment, and decisions that had rewritten people's lives. He didn't look angry. He didn't have to. He just looked at his daughter, then at the man standing in her way, and without raising his voice, without lifting a finger, he changed the entire room. No badge, no announcement, just a robe, a name, a truth walking in on polished shoes and asking one question, and everything that had been certain a minute ago, suddenly wasn't. She didn't smile, didn't rush to him, just let the air leave her lungs like something she'd been holding in for too long. Dad. That one word didn't need volume. It carried weight, the kind that rearranged posture, the kind that made people remember what they'd forgotten. Greg shifted. His eyes moved. Amira, the man, the robe, the polished shoes, then back to Amira again, like trying to recalculate a map that had suddenly changed its borders. The man stepped forward. Calm, intentional, not a stride, a presence. He stopped beside her, looked down, just slightly, then rested one hand on her shoulder. Not tight, not protective, just there. And it was enough, because suddenly, Amira wasn't just a girl in a hoodie with a backpack. She was someone with history, with story, with context. And that, to men like Greg, was the most dangerous kind of truth. The man didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. His presence spoke for him. The robe moved as he did, softly, without sound, but it pulled every pair of eyes in the room like gravity. Greg opened his mouth, closed it. Amira stayed still. Her arms now rested loosely by her sides, backpack strap slightly sliding off her shoulder, but she didn't fix it. She didn't need to. Her father was standing next to her now, the Honorable Judge Terence L. Mays, the man who signed every warrant in the county, the man who'd overseen trials, sworn in officials, and been quoted in news stories about justice, fairness and reform. And now he was standing in aisle 5, next to a girl who hadn't taken a single thing, but had nearly been taken apart anyway, not by law, by assumption. The silence stretched. Greg looked at Marla, who took a step back, hands twitching near her vest like she was suddenly too aware of her name tag. The boy with the phone was still recording, but slower now, like even he knew this wasn't just a video anymore. The judge didn't speak yet, not because he didn't have something to say, but because sometimes silence is the loudest sound in the room. And the way he looked at Greg, steady and unreadable, said it all. You made a mistake, and now you know it. The judge didn't shift his weight, didn't take a step forward. He just looked at Greg like he was measuring something small. Did you accuse my daughter of theft? His voice wasn't loud. It was level, even, like a line drawn in permanent ink. Greg's mouth opened fast, like he'd been preparing a defense before the question even landed. Sir, we had reasonable suspicion. You had nothing, the judge said. Flat, final. Greg blinked. The flush crept up his neck, slow and undeniable. She was behaving unusual, looking over her shoulder, kept checking the aisle. You mean, the judge said. She was aware of her surroundings. Greg hesitated. That pause, too long, too late, spoke louder than anything he could have added. I was just following protocol, he offered weakly. The judge's eyes narrowed, just slightly. What part of your protocol includes detaining a minor with no evidence, no stolen item, and no cause? Greg didn't answer, not because he didn't have words, because he knew none of them would hold. The younger employee stepped back again, suddenly too interested in a stack of gum packets. Marla looked at the floor. Amira stood still, not shrinking, not retreating, just watching. Her father's hand remained on her shoulder, light, steady, a tether. The judge spoke again. You didn't see a crime. You saw a narrative you decided to believe. Greg swallowed hard. That's not fair. No, the judge replied. It isn't. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was intentional, the kind that lets a truth settle where it hurts. He looked around, at the employees, the onlookers, the space that had so quickly turned from store to spectacle. "She's a 17-year-old girl buying school supplies," he said. "And you treated her like a suspect, because she didn't smile, didn't speak, and had the wrong skin under the wrong light." No one responded. Because what do you say when the truth walks in wearing a robe and speaks in past tense? The judge didn't need them to agree, he just needed them to hear it. And they did. The store was still open. Technically, but no one moved. Not the cashier with a half-scanned box of tissues still in hand. Not the woman by the greeting cards who had wandered too close and couldn't figure out how to back away without being obvious. Not even the boy with the phone, whose screen now hung by his side. Forgotten. It felt like a courtroom, without pews, without walls, just fluorescent lights, a linoleum floor, and the weight of being wrong settling on people who weren't used to being questioned. The judge turned slightly, not just toward Greg now, but to the space itself. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You saw a black girl in a hoodie," he said, "and decided she was danger." He let the words land, not like a blow, like a mirror. "That," he continued, "is the only thing that happened here." Greg shifted, arms no longer crossed, but hanging at his sides like they'd forgotten how to hold authority. "I didn't mean yes you did." Still calm, still precise, no edge, just fact. "You meant to watch her," the judge said. "You meant to doubt her. You meant to escalate a situation that didn't exist, because for a moment, your comfort depended on her guilt." A low shuffle in the background, a shoe squeaking quietly on tile, but no one dared to break the moment. "You didn't ask if she needed help," the judge said. "You didn't greet her, you didn't observe, you assumed." Marla's eyes darted away, glassy now. The younger employee looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. The judge's voice softened, not out of mercy, but out of clarity. "This happens everywhere. In banks, on sidewalks, in stores just like this one. It's not about policies, it's about patterns." He looked at Amira. She didn't nod, didn't smile, she just stood still. Seen now, but not because they finally looked. Because someone made it impossible to keep looking away. He turned back to Greg. "You didn't stop her because of what she did. You stopped her because of what she reminded you of." The room didn't argue. It couldn't. Because truth, once spoken plainly, doesn't invite debate. It demands reflection. Greg straightened his spine. Tried to find the edge of authority again. Somewhere in his voice. "We treat everyone equally," he said. It came out too fast. Too clean. Like a line memorized from a manual. The judge didn't react. Not at first. He just reached inside his coat. Slow, smooth, unbothered. From an inside pocket, he pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Crisp, unwrinkled. The room seemed to lean forward. He unfolded it carefully, like it mattered, because it did, and then he held it up. One page, black print, store logo in the corner, a subject line in bold: Community Outreach Invitation. "To Honorable Terence L. Mays," the judge read aloud. "We at Brightmart are honored to welcome local leaders like yourself. Please visit our store to observe our commitment to diversity, equity, and community trust." He paused, turned the letter slightly, so Greg could see his own name at the bottom. Signed Greg Hamilton, store manager. The same name on the tag, now resting against a chest suddenly too tight. The same man who had just called security on a teenage girl buying highlighters. Greg stared at the paper like it had betrayed him. "I sent that," he said, barely above a whisper. "Last week." The judge nodded once. "You did." Greg looked at Amira, then back at the robe, the name, the weight of it all pressing down. "I didn't know she was your daughter." "That," the judge said, folding the letter again with methodical care, "is exactly the problem." Not angry, not loud, just finished. Greg opened his mouth again, but there were no words that could hold, because the man standing in front of him wasn't just a father. He was the recipient of a letter filled with corporate platitudes. The public face Greg wanted to impress. The version of authority he'd rehearsed for. But now, the same man had shown up through the wrong door, in the wrong moment, wearing something no one could ignore. And Greg had failed the test he didn't know he was taking. Not because he didn't treat everyone the same, but because he did, and that sameness was suspicion. Amira looked down at her hands, then back up. She wasn't surprised, only disappointed. The judge tucked the letter back into his coat, and Greg, for the first time, looked like someone who wished silence could undo sound. But it couldn't. Not today. The silence stretched, long enough for the fluorescent hum overhead to grow louder than anyone wanted to admit. The judge didn't rush, didn't fidget. He just let the weight of the moment breathe. Greg stood frozen. His badge suddenly felt like decoration. His hands, once crossed, once commanding, now hung like they didn't know where to land. The judge didn't raise the paper again, didn't point. He just said it, quiet, even, lethal in its clarity. "You called the police," he said, "on your county's senior judge's daughter." The words landed like stones in a still pond, each syllable a ripple. Greg's mouth opened slightly, but the judge continued, without cause. Another pause. Without apology. "One more, and in full view of your staff and customers." Greg's face twitched, like a man trying to reset a screen that had already gone black. "I didn't," he began. "You did," the judge said. "You had no evidence. You had no theft. You had a feeling." His voice didn't shake, didn't spike. It was the kind of voice built in courtrooms, the kind that doesn't need volume to hold power. He looked around, let his eyes sweep across the staff who had watched, said nothing, then stepped back. The boy with the phone, still recording. The shoppers frozen in their own discomfort. Then he looked at Amira, still calm, still standing, still carrying more grace than any of them deserved. "You didn't just humiliate my daughter," the judge said. "You revealed something about this place, about yourself." Greg's breath caught. "Sir, I had no idea that she was mine," the judge finished. Would it have mattered? Greg couldn't answer that.
Because they both knew.
It would have, and that was the point. The robe shifted slightly, as the judge turned back to Amira. He didn't speak to her. He didn't need to. His presence beside her was the speech, and every second he stood there made one thing undeniably clear. Authority wasn't behind the register. It wasn't holding a phone or wearing a badge. It was standing in black robes beside a girl who hadn't moved once. Because real power doesn't shout. It stands still, and lets the silence do the rest. The sliding doors hissed again. This time 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, belts heavy, radios clipped, eyes scanning, but no one called out to them. No one pointed. No one needed them anymore, because the moment had already passed. Judge Mays turned without a word, his robe brushing the edge of the checkout counter. Amira fell in step beside him, her hands still empty, her posture still upright. No raised voices, no demands, no apology, just 2 people walking out the same way she'd come in. Calm, quiet, unbothered. Only now the whole store watched. Not with suspicion, with recognition. Each step echoed, not because the floor was loud, but because the weight of what had happened refused to be quiet. Greg didn't say anything. He couldn't. His voice had collapsed somewhere between defense and regret. Marla gripped the edge of a shelf, as if bracing herself against the fact that everything had changed in front of her, and she hadn't said a word. The boy with the phone never lifted it again. He just held it, screen still on, unsure whether he was filming the end or the aftermath. As they reached the doors, Amira looked straight ahead, not proud, not angry, just clear. Because walking out with your dignity intact, after they tried to take it, that's a power most people never learn to carry. The glass doors parted again. Sunlight spilled in. The judge didn't pause, but Amira did. Just for a second. She turned her head, not far, just enough, and her eyes met Greg's. She didn't glare, didn't smirk. She didn't need to. The look said everything. You will remember this, not because of what you did, but because of who she was, and who was standing beside her when the truth walked out. The morning light hit the parking lot different, not brighter, just heavier. Inside the store the usual buzz was missing. No chatter at the registers, no clatter of carts against linoleum, just movement, dulled by awareness. Marla clocked in without a word. Greg was already at his desk. The door closed, blinds tilted halfway like Shane needed shade. At 8:02 a.m., the company email dropped. Subject: urgent staff compliance. New protocol. No greeting, no small talk, just 3 words in bold. Mandatory, effective immediately. Diversity sensitivity training. Procedural review. Incident debrief. Attendance required. No exceptions. Every employee, every shift, every store in the region. And just beneath that a quiet warning: failure to comply may result in formal review. Screens blinked back at stunned faces. No one said what they were thinking, because everyone knew. This wasn't just about a training module. This was about the girl, the one they watched, the one no one defended, the one who didn't raise her voice, but somehow managed to shift the ground under all of them. By 9:15 the newspaper hit the breakroom table, folded once, headline sharp enough to cut through the silence. When justice wears a hoodie, judge's daughter profiled at local store. There was a photo, not of her face, not of the confrontation, just the back of her and her father walking out. His robe flowing beside her, her chin slightly lifted, dignity, mid-step. A still frame that said more than 1,000 statements ever could. Some employees read it twice, some only looked at the picture, others didn't touch it at all. By noon, shoppers came in slower. A few glanced around, eyes lingering longer on the staff than usual. One woman near the batteries whispered to her son, "This is the place." And down aisle 5, where it all began, the shelves were freshly stocked, too neat, too intentional, almost like someone was trying to pretend it never happened. But it had, and it didn't need yelling to be remembered. It had walked out quietly, and left a silence behind that was still unfolding. If this story moved you, share it, not for outrage, but for awareness. Because dignity shouldn't depend on who walks in behind you. Speak up when it's easier to stay quiet. Drop a comment. What part hit you hardest? Like if you believe respect must be earned, not assumed. Subscribe for more true stories of justice, grace and quiet power.